The man in the worn-out cap. The clock read 3:14 p.m. when the doors of Wellington Grand, one of the most prestigious private banks in Los Angeles, slid open with a whisper. Inside, the scent of imported wood polish and Italian leather filled the air. The walls gleamed with polished oak panels, the chandeliers above sparkled like frozen fireworks, and the hushed murmurs of high-powered conversations echoed gently across the marble floors. This was a place where billionaires came to speak in whispers, where fortunes were discussed over cappuccinos and hedge fund managers called each other by first name. The staff were trained not just in finance, but in discernment. A Rolex wasn't impressive here. It was expected. Clients walked in with designer briefcases and left in chauffeured Bentleys. So when a man in a faded black t-shirt, scuffed jeans, and a baseball cap that looked older than the intern by the door walked in, the atmosphere changed. Subtly at first. A pause in the conversation at the espresso bar, a side glance from the security guard, a receptionist whose smile dropped just half an inch. He didn't walk like he was lost. He didn't look around like a man out of place. He walked with quiet confidence, his hands tucked casually into his pockets. But even so, the judgment came swiftly and silently. At the far end of the room, behind a polished walnut desk, sat Ryan Hargrove, a rising star in the bank, known for his sharp suits and sharper tongue. Ryan was everything this institution prided itself on: young, ambitious, and ruthlessly polished. He had an uncanny ability to sniff out true wealth, and even more impressive, to detect when someone didn't belong. Ryan saw the man approach and didn't even try to hide his reaction. His lip twitched into a smirk. His eyes narrowed just slightly as he gave the man a head-to-toe scan. Worn boots, no watch, no briefcase. He didn't recognize him. And that meant one thing: not important. "Excuse me," the man said politely as he stepped up to the counter. Ryan didn't respond right away. He tapped at his keyboard as though too busy to be disturbed, a silent message of dismissal. Then finally, he looked up, eyebrows raised in forced patience. "Yes, sir?" he asked, dragging the last word with just enough emphasis to let the man know he was out of his league. The man, still calm, still kind, spoke again. "I'm here to make a withdrawal." Ryan blinked slowly, almost amused. He leaned back in his leather chair, folding his hands behind his head. "You sure you're in the right place? This isn't a Western Union, pal." A few soft chuckles broke out from nearby clients. One woman in a beige power suit turned slightly in her chair to get a better view. A man reading Forbes lowered his magazine, intrigued. The man in the cap didn't react. He simply reached into his back pocket and pulled out a sleek, solid black card, one of the rarest bank cards in the world. Ryan stared at it for a second, then chuckled. "Oh, wow," Ryan said with a mocking grin, holding the card between two fingers. "Black card. These are collector's items now. You can buy replicas online for like $20. He turned the card over slowly, expecting to find something off. A fake name, expired date, anything. But no, the name engraved was Keanu Reeves. Ryan frowned. It couldn't be. He looked up. Now that he stared more closely, there was something familiar about the man's face beneath that cap and beard. But it couldn't be. Why would he walk in here, dressed like that? Ryan coughed once, trying to mask his discomfort, then slid the card through the scanner anyway. It beeped, processing. And then the screen lit up. Ryan's smirk evaporated in real time. He leaned in, then leaned in again. His pupils dilated. His lips parted ever so slightly. His right hand twitched as he gripped the mouse, refreshing the screen once. Then again. And then a third time. Behind him, a junior associate leaned over, saw the screen, and visibly recoiled. There, in digital ink, was the number that made Ryan's spine stiffen. $322 million and 68 cents. Not just in assets, in liquid. Sitting in that account. Untouched, instant access. The air turned thick. Someone in the waiting lounge gasped audibly. A security guard near the elevator adjusted his stance, eyes now locked on the scene unfolding. The woman in the beige suit slowly closed her laptop, her earlier smirk now replaced with stunned silence. Ryan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Is there a problem?" Keanu asked, his tone still soft, still calm. Ryan stood up slowly, the card still trembling slightly in his hand. "Mr. Reeves." "Sir, I didn't realize." Keanu tilted his head slightly. "That I had an account here." Ryan flushed. "No, sir, that I was me." Ryan looked like he might faint. Behind him, a tall figure in a tailored gray suit approached. It was Mr. Donovan, the regional manager. He had seen the reaction. He had heard the shift in tone. And he knew something had gone very wrong. "What's going on here?" Donovan asked, glancing between Ryan and Keanu. Ryan tried to answer, but his voice cracked. Instead, he simply turned the screen toward his boss. The moment Donovan saw the name and numbers, his professional facade cracked. He straightened abruptly, his eyes flicking to Keanu's face. It took only a second to recognize the man behind the humble appearance. Keanu Reeves. The real deal. The silence that followed was a vacuum. Everyone in the bank was watching now. Donovan recovered quickly. "Mr. Reeves, I'm terribly sorry for the inconvenience. Please, allow me to escort you to the VIP suite, personally." Keanu looked from Donovan to Ryan, then back again. He didn't speak. Not yet. Because he wasn't here for comfort. He was here to make a point. He finally turned his gaze back to Ryan. "If I had worn a suit," he asked slowly, "would I have gotten a smile instead of a smirk?" Ryan didn't answer. "Or maybe," Keanu continued, "if I walked in with a Rolex and a limousine outside, you'd have offered me a cappuccino." Ryan swallowed hard. The entire bank was silent. Keanu reached out and took his card back from Ryan's frozen hand. Then he said, clearly enough for everyone to hear, "You don't need to know who someone is before you treat them with respect. You just need to know they're human." And with that, he turned and walked away. No bodyguards, no entourage, just a man in a t-shirt and a worn-out cap who had just taught a lesson that shook a bank to its very core. The price of assumption. The heavy glass doors of Wellington Grand Bank closed behind Keanu Reeves with a gentle whoosh, but the storm he left behind didn't settle. It grew louder with every silent second. Inside, time seemed to stop. Ryan Hargrove stood frozen behind the counter, still staring at the space Keanu had just occupied. The black card no longer in his hand felt like a phantom weight, and his fingers trembled visibly. The flush on his cheeks was no longer from arrogance, it was shame. No one in the lobby spoke. Even the clicking of computer keys had stopped. Clients who had once chuckled and smirked at the man in the worn-out cap now sat quietly, their eyes glued to Ryan, their minds racing with guilt. Mr. Donovan, the regional manager, cleared his throat and took a step forward. His face, usually composed like stone, now looked tight and pale. He knew what had just happened wasn't just a customer service failure. It was a brand catastrophe, one that had unfolded in full view of an audience that mattered. Ryan finally snapped out of his frozen trance and turned toward Donovan. "Sir, I didn't know it was him," he said, the words spilling out in a panic. He walked in looking like. Donovan's eyes flared. "Like what?" he said coldly. "Like someone not worth your time." Ryan's jaw clenched. He didn't look like a VIP. How was I supposed to know? Donovan stared at him, stone-faced. "You weren't supposed to know, Ryan. You were supposed to respect." Ryan's mouth opened and shut like a fish pulled from water. He had nothing. A voice broke the silence from across the floor. "Was that actually Keanu Reeves?" asked a man in a pinstripe suit seated near the lounge. Another whispered, "Did you see the balance on his account? I thought that was a system glitch." But no one was laughing now. The Wellington Grand name had always been synonymous with exclusivity, class, and elite clientele, but in that moment, the truth had been revealed in front of every guest. Behind all the polished wood and imported marble, there lived prejudice dressed up as policy. One of the younger associates, Sophie, stood silently near the printer. She had watched the entire interaction. Her heart thudded in her chest as she remembered the calm, dignified look Keanu wore throughout the ordeal. He hadn't needed to prove anything. He hadn't argued, raised his voice, or even flashed his fame like a weapon. He'd just waited, patiently, and let the truth speak for itself. And now it was screaming. Donovan snapped into motion. "I want a full incident report on my desk within the hour," he barked at Ryan. "And contact corporate. Now." "But sir," "No excuses. We just humiliated one of the most well-respected people in the world. And not just because of who he is, but because of how he wasn't treated. This isn't just bad optics. This is a PR disaster." Ryan sat down heavily in his chair, stunned and sweating. He looked at the screen again. The balance was still there, $322 million. And the name attached to the account didn't just carry money. It carried weight, honor, dignity, reputation. He'd mocked a man worth hundreds of millions, a man who gave more to charity in a year than Ryan made in a lifetime. And worse, he hadn't even realized it until it was far, far too late. Meanwhile, just 3 blocks away, Keanu sat at a small outdoor cafe, tucked into a quiet corner under a tree. He ordered a simple cup of black coffee and sat alone. No phone in his hand, no entourage, just him and the silence. The waitress, a young woman named Delia, didn't recognize him at first glance, but something about his presence made her instinctively treat him kindly. She smiled and said, "How's your day going, sir?" Keanu offered a gentle nod. "Better now." Delia smiled. "Well, if you need anything else, let me know. This spot's peaceful in the afternoon." As she walked away, Keanu leaned back in his chair and watched people pass. Nobody stared. Nobody approached him. He liked it that way. For years, Keanu had worn the label of the nice guy of Hollywood. Not because of PR strategy or marketing, but because it was true. He lived simply, donated secretly, helped quietly. He didn't chase attention. But sometimes life thrust it upon him. And now, that bank, that moment. He knew the video would surface. He'd seen the security cameras, the smartphones barely veiled behind magazine pages and handbags. The world had seen how he'd been treated. The question now wasn't whether the bank would respond. The question was, would he? Back at Wellington Grand HQ, 4:57 p.m. Up in the skyscraper's 47th floor boardroom, the air was thick with anxiety. A special emergency meeting had been called. Executives, marketing heads, PR advisors, all scrambling to contain the fire. The video had already leaked. A young intern named Lila had posted a 43-second clip on her social media, captioned, "Banker mocks this guy in a cap, then realizes it's Keanu Reeves. Instant regret." It had gone viral in under 2 hours. News outlets were already picking it up. Comments were flooding in. "This is why you treat everyone with respect. Doesn't matter what they wear. Keanu is a class act. The bank, not so much. This isn't just about Keanu. This is about how regular people get treated every day." Rebecca Carter, the bank's lead PR crisis strategist, stood at the head of the table, her brow furrowed, pacing. "This is not just a bad look. This is a turning point," she said sharply. "We either come clean and change our policies, or we lose public trust forever." The CEO, an older man with graying hair and sharp eyes, folded his hands. "Do we reach out to Mr. Reeves?" "We already did," Rebecca replied. "His publicist hasn't responded yet." Another executive chimed in. "We should offer him a private apology, maybe name a scholarship after him, or donate in his name. Rebecca shook her head. You can't buy back dignity. You can only earn it. And right now, they were deep in the red. Later that night, 8:16 p.m., Keanu sat in his modest home tucked away in the Hollywood Hills. No private chef, no indoor waterfall, just bookshelves, quiet corners, and a view of the stars. His phone buzzed on the table, dozens of texts, missed calls, news alerts. He sighed. He opened a message from his manager. You okay? Twitter's on fire. The bank wants to talk. Let me know what you want to do. He stared at the screen for a moment, then opened another message from someone unexpected. Sophie, the junior associate from the bank. Mr. Reeves, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. Not all of us felt the way Ryan did. Some of us were ashamed of how he treated you. Thank you for keeping your grace when you didn't have to. Keanu smiled faintly. That one message meant more than all the corporate apologies in the world. He began typing. Meanwhile, 8:31 p.m. Bank headquarters. Ryan sat alone in the break room, long after closing time. The lights were dim, the silence heavy. He had made a mistake. No, a series of them. But it wasn't just about Keanu. He thought about all the other customers he'd brushed off, all the people who didn't look rich, the ones he hurried past or dismissed without a second glance. What if some of them had stories he never heard? What if some of them were worth more, not in money, but in humanity? His phone buzzed. A single text from the manager. Meeting. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. Come prepared. He knew what that meant. Back with Keanu. 10:03 p.m. Keanu opened his laptop and began writing. Not a complaint. Not a threat. Just the truth. When silence speaks loudest. The morning after the incident at Wellington Grand Bank, the world had already changed. The sun hadn't even fully risen over the Los Angeles skyline when Keanu Reeves' bank incident began trending in 43 countries. Twitter was ablaze. News anchors on morning shows shook their heads in disbelief. Opinion columns titled How One Quiet Man Exposed the Banking Industry were already going live. But amid all the noise, Keanu himself remained silent. And that silence, somehow, spoke louder than 1,000 angry posts. 7:24 a.m., downtown Los Angeles. In a small apartment on the city's east side, Maribel, a single mother and school teacher, sipped her coffee while scrolling through her phone. She didn't usually have time for celebrity drama. But this was different. Her eyes welled with unexpected emotion as she read the comments on the video. It wasn't just about Keanu. It was about every time someone like her had walked into a bank, or a store, or an office, only to be dismissed, judged, ignored. She remembered once taking her son to open his first savings account. She had dressed in her cleanest clothes and still received that look from the teller, that slight sigh, that fake smile. And now here was one of the most famous men in the world, going through the same thing. Maribel leaned forward and whispered to herself, maybe now they'll understand. 8:09 a.m., inside Wellington Grand Bank. Ryan Hargrove sat at the long glass conference table, his reflection split into shards beneath him. The room was nearly empty. Only Mr. Donovan, the regional manager, and Rebecca Carter, the PR strategist, had arrived. The atmosphere was tense. Ryan had barely slept. His eyes were bloodshot, his once perfect hair slightly out of place. In front of him sat a thick folder labeled Incident Response Protocol. He hadn't opened it. He didn't need to read a guide to know he had failed. Donovan tapped the table. Still no public comment from Keanu. Rebecca shook her head. Not a word. No interviews. No statements. He's letting the silence do the work. Ryan glanced up. So, maybe that means we're off the hook. Rebecca turned to him sharply. No, Ryan. That's what makes it worse. He's not demanding anything. He doesn't need to. People are doing it for him. He made the world look at us. and he didn't even raise his voice. Donovan added, "He didn't just expose you. He exposed us. Our values, our training, our arrogance." Ryan looked down. He had trained himself to judge by the surface: shoes, watch, posture, voice tone. He thought it made him efficient. Now he realized it made him blind. 10:03 a.m. Keanu's home. Keanu sat by a wide window with his laptop open. He'd been thinking for hours. Not about revenge. Not even about damage control. But about something bigger. He'd seen the comments, read the articles, watched the reactions. But what moved him most were the stories. Hundreds of messages from strangers around the world. Veterans turned away at hotels. Elderly couples treated like burdens at banks. Factory workers ignored in luxury stores. It wasn't about money. It was about dignity. And so finally, he began to type. 10:48 a.m. The post that broke the internet. Keanu's verified account posted the following message to his 5.2 million followers. ****I walked into a bank yesterday. I wore a t-shirt, jeans, and an old cap, and I was judged for it. But this isn't just about me. It's about every person who's ever been ignored, dismissed, or underestimated because of how they look. Your worth isn't measured by your wardrobe. Kindness costs nothing. Dignity should be universal. I'm not sharing this to shame anyone. I'm sharing it to remind everyone. Respect should never be earned. It should be automatic. ****KR. Within minutes, the post exploded. 1 million likes. 300,000 shares. Global headlines within an hour. Every major media outlet quoted him. Respect should never be earned. It should be automatic. Keanu Reeves' viral message strikes a global nerve. News anchors praised his humility. Fans flooded his comments with stories of their own. One reply read, "I'm a janitor. The day I wore a suit to my daughter's graduation, people finally looked me in the eye. I shouldn't have needed a suit." Another, "This happened to my dad last week. Thank you for using your voice for the voiceless." And still, Keanu said nothing more. 1:20 p.m., Wellington Grand Boardroom. The atmosphere in the boardroom was now pure panic. Rebecca was fielding calls from 4 departments while Donovan paced by the window. Ryan sat in silence, now fully aware of the tsunami he had helped unleash. "We need to do something," one executive barked. "This is out of control." Rebecca slammed her laptop shut. "We had our chance to do something. We chose silence." Another said, "Should we release our own statement?" Donovan shook his head. "Nobody cares what we say now. They care about what we do." Rebecca looked at Ryan. "You humiliated a man who embodies everything we claim to stand for. So now, you get to make it right." Ryan paled. "What do you mean?" Donovan crossed his arms. "We're putting you on camera." Ryan blinked. "What? No way." Rebecca was firm. "You messed up publicly. You apologize publicly. Not because we told you to, but because it's the right thing." Ryan's mouth opened to argue, but then he stopped. Because somewhere, deep inside, he knew they were right. 3:47 p.m., the apology. An official video was posted from Wellington Grand Bank's account. It featured a clean, stark background. No logo, no branding, just Ryan. His hair wasn't perfect. His tie was loosened. His voice cracked slightly. He stared into the camera and said, "****yesterday, I judged a man based on how he looked. And I was wrong. Not just because he turned out to be Keanu Reeves, but because even if he wasn't, he still deserved respect. I've built a career on first impressions. But I forgot that human dignity doesn't wear a brand name. To Mr. Reeves, I'm deeply sorry. To everyone watching, thank you for holding me accountable. I deserved it." ****. The comments poured in. This is what real accountability looks like. Still not sure if he should keep his job, but at least he faced the music. Let's not forget, He only apologized after Keanu stayed silent. Some forgave him, others didn't. But no one could deny it. A lesson had been learned. 5:13 p.m. Keanu replies one last time. Keanu posted one final update. *** apology accepted. But this was never about me. Let's just treat each other better. Every day. In every place. No matter what someone wears. ***. KR. In a world full of noise, Keanu had chosen grace. And in doing so, he didn't just walk out of a bank. He walked into people's hearts. The quiet revolution. The world didn't just watch. It responded. Within 24 hours of Keanu Reeves' post, the ripples became waves, and then a quiet, thunderous revolution. Across the country, customers of Wellington Grand Bank began lining up at branches. But they weren't depositing money. They were pulling it out. 9:08 a.m., Beverly Hills branch. A line of luxury cars snaked around the block. Inside the marble-floored lobby, 3 sharply dressed tellers tapped nervously on keyboards. But this wasn't a rush of excited investors. It was a walkout. A woman in a gold blazer stepped up to the counter and smiled politely. "Yes, I'd like to close all my accounts, please." The teller blinked. "All of them?" "Yes," she said. "I've been banking here for 15 years, but I'm not staying with an institution that humiliates people for not wearing Prada." Behind her, a man in a tailored gray suit nodded. "Same for me." The teller's voice dropped. "Just to clarify, are you withdrawing the full amount?" The man leaned in slightly. $4.3 million. That a problem? The teller didn't speak. She just began typing, her fingers shaking slightly. 10:31 a.m. Corporate headquarters. The executive boardroom at Wellington Grand had never looked this grim. Every screen on the wall showed a live dashboard, customer withdrawals, social sentiment tracking, media coverage, brand trust scores, all dropping like stones. The CEO, Franklin Meacham, stood with his arms crossed as department heads scrambled for answers. "We've already had $120 million in closed accounts in under 12 hours, one exec reported. Another added, "Influencers and public figures are posting #WithDrawForRespect. It's becoming a full-blown movement." A third chimed in. "Even our own staff are threatening walkouts. They're embarrassed to wear the badge." Meacham's jaw tightened. This isn't about one mistake anymore. It's about our culture. Then, for the first time, he looked straight at Rebecca Carter, the bank's head of crisis strategy. "Find him," Meacham said. Rebecca frowned. "Keanu." "Yes, I want to talk to him." "In person." Rebecca hesitated. "And what exactly do you want to say?" The CEO's answer was short. "That we're ready to listen. Not with a statement. With action." Meanwhile, Keanu's home. 11:02 a.m. Keanu Reeves stood on his quiet balcony, sipping a modest cup of tea. The city buzzed far below, but up here, it was still. He hadn't planned for any of this. Not the viral explosion. Not the movement. Certainly not the withdrawal of millions in protest. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't ignore it anymore. He opened his laptop. His inbox was a storm. Brands, CEOs, media outlets, all requesting interviews, partnerships, PR meetings. He ignored them all. Except one. A single message sent just 15 minutes ago. From an email he hadn't seen in years. Subject: "I owe you an apology." From Elliot Rayner. Keanu sat down, heart quietly stirred. He remembered the name. Elliot Rayner had been the man who fired him from his first film set, not because of his talent, but because he wore old sneakers to a table read. "You don't look like a star," Elliot had told him. "You look like a delivery guy." Keanu hadn't responded then. He'd just walked away. Now, decades later, the man who'd once tried to erase him had written him. Again. Email. "Keanu, I doubt you even remember me. But I remember you. When I saw the video yesterday, it hit me like a brick. I was Ryan once. Maybe worse. I thought class was something you wore, not something you carried. And I realize now, I wasn't just wrong about you. I was wrong about a lot of people. I'm not asking for a response. Just wanted to say, thank you. You've changed more than a bank. You've changed hearts. Elliot. Keanu stared at the screen for a long time. Then, without thinking, he began typing. Reply. Elliot. I remember. But I never held it against you. We all grow. We all wake up. Thank you for writing. Care. As he clicked send, his phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca Carter. Mr. Reeves, this is not a press request. Our CEO would like to meet you, privately. Please consider. Keanu sighed, then typed back. Where? 2:07 p.m., a small, empty church in Koreatown. That's where Keanu chose to meet them. Not in a hotel boardroom, not in a penthouse office, but in a humble open church with dusty pews and stained glass windows catching the fading afternoon sun. He sat in the third row, arms resting on the back of the pew in front of him. The doors creaked open. Rebecca entered first. Behind her, CEO Franklin Meacham walked slowly down the aisle, his polished shoes echoing off the old stone floor. Keanu didn't stand. He just turned, nodded once. Meacham sat beside him. No cameras, no fanfare, just two men in silence for a long moment. Then the CEO spoke. You didn't have to meet me, Meacham said. Keanu shrugged. You didn't have to apologize. I came because I don't want this to be a branding exercise. I want it to be a change. Keanu looked out the stained glass window. I'm listening, he said. And in the next 15 minutes, the CEO of one of the most powerful banks in America poured out more honesty than he ever had in his career. He talked about the systemic arrogance in finance, about the obsession with image, about how they had stopped seeing people. And then he said the words Keanu didn't expect. We'd like your help. Keanu turned to him. Meacham continued. Not a campaign. Not a commercial. We want to build a program, in your name, if you'll let us. A dignity-first initiative. A national retraining system for our staff, our partners, even our executives. Keanu was quiet. Then he said, I don't need my name on it. But the people might. Rebecca added gently. Because they trust you. Keanu leaned back. He wasn't one for endorsements. But this felt different. It wasn't a product. It was a shift. Later that evening. Social media update. From Wellington Grand Bank's official account. ***, a new day begins. We've partnered with Mr. Keanu Reeves to launch the Respect Initiative. Training across all our branches. Anonymous dignity audits. Scholarships for underserved communities. No more dress codes that limit who gets taken seriously. Not because it's popular. Because it's right. ***. Keanu shared the post with only 4 words. Actions matter. Let's begin. In a small apartment in East La, Maribel saw the post and smiled. She turned to her son, who was watching TV. You know what? She said, grabbing her purse. We're going to the bank tomorrow. Why? The boy asked. She looked at him with a smile. To open your first savings account. The letter that changed everything. 8:12 a.m., Wellington Grand Downtown Branch. The sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the bank, casting gold across the floors that just days ago echoed with judgment and silence. Today, the atmosphere was different. A poster hung near the entrance. Welcome to the Respect Initiative. We don't see your clothes. We see your character. Customers took quiet note. Some smiled. Others simply nodded in approval. But the real change wasn't on the walls. It was happening in the hearts of those who once thought they knew everything. Inside the staff break room, Rayan Hargrove sat alone, sipping a cold cup of coffee, staring at a manila envelope in front of him. He hadn't slept well since the incident. His apology had gone viral. Some called him brave. Others called him performative. But none of the opinions mattered as much as the one inside his own head. Because Ryan knew something no one else did. He didn't just mistreat Keanu Reeves. He had built a career on misjudging people. He could list names. He could recall moments. Elderly customers he brushed off. Blue-collar workers he rushed through appointments. The young woman in a hoodie he assumed couldn't afford the account she applied for, only to learn days later she was a tech entrepreneur worth $3.8 million. He had been trained to see value in suits and status. Now, all he saw were regrets. Ryan looked at the envelope again. Inside was his resignation letter. Signed, sealed, ready. He reached for it and paused, because at that moment, a voice echoed from the hallway. "Hey, Ryan." It was Sophie, the junior associate. Ryan cleared his throat. "Yeah?" She stepped in cautiously. "There's something. Someone left this for you. It's addressed personally." He frowned as she handed him a small, folded piece of paper. Just a simple sheet. No logo, no letterhead. The handwriting was childish. "Dear Mr. Banker, my name is Toby. I'm 9. I saw you on the computer when you said sorry to Mr. Keanu. My mom said you were rude, but you said sorry, and that is brave. Sometimes I mess up too, like when I lied about my homework. But I said sorry and tried to do better. So I hope you try to do better too. Because if grown-ups don't try, who will?" From Toby. Ryan's throat tightened. A 9-year-old had written what no adult had said to him. Not a scolding, not a cancellation, a chance. He held the letter for a long moment, and slowly, he slid the resignation envelope into the trash. Meanwhile, Keanu's house, 9:26 a.m. Keanu stood by the kitchen counter, flipping through his morning mail. Bills, magazines, a few fan letters. And then, he saw it. A small white envelope with blue crayon handwriting. He opened it. "Dear Mr. Keanu. Hi. My name is Toby, and I saw what happened in the bank. My mom said people were being mean because you wore a cap and jeans. I think that's silly. You looked fine to me. I wear caps too. I don't like dressing fancy. Anyway, I wanted to say thank you. Because after you said what you said, my mom took me to the bank and said, 'We're opening a savings account, and we're doing it with pride.' I got my first bank card. It has a star on it, and I'm saving for a telescope. I want to be an astronaut. So thank you. Because you made something happen. Your fan, Toby." Keanu smiled. His eyes glistened. There had been hundreds of comments, thousands of shares. But this was real. A child who didn't see status. A mother who found courage. A moment turned into a movement. And suddenly, Keanu knew what to do next. 10:45 a.m. Corporate headquarters, 49th floor. Rebecca Carter stepped into the conference room holding a folder marked QONFIDENTIL, Phase 2. She set it in front of CEO Franklin Meacham. He opened it and blinked. "What is this?" Rebecca smiled. "Keanu's idea." Inside was a bold proposal. The Keanu Fund for Everyday Futures. Matched savings accounts for children from working-class families. Financial literacy programs in underfunded schools. In-person events led by bank volunteers. Scholarships for youth who are judged by appearance but driven by heart. Annual honor day to celebrate individuals who stood up with dignity. Meacham leaned back. He doesn't want it in his name. He said if it helps kids dream bigger, we can call it anything. The CEO was quiet for a moment. Then he whispered, "We'll call it the Toby Initiative." 2:03 p.m. Keanu's quiet visit. Without press. Without cameras. Keanu arrived at Eastmont Elementary, where Toby attended 4th grade. He wore jeans, a hoodie, and of course, his faded cap. The principal met him at the gate, breathless. "Mr. Reeves, this is a surprise. I'm just here to say hi." The principal hesitated. Would you like to meet Toby? Keanu smiled. Yeah, I think I would. They led him down the hallway. Children gasped as he passed, whispering excitedly. But Keanu never looked like a celebrity. He looked like someone belonging, no matter what he wore. Outside the classroom, Toby sat reading a book on stars. When he looked up and saw Keanu, he blinked. Then slowly he smiled. You came, he whispered. Keanu knelt beside him and said gently, Thanks for the letter, astronaut. Toby beamed. You made my mom cry, he said. Keanu chuckled. Good tears. Yeah, she said people like you remind her there's still good in the world. Keanu paused, then gave Toby a small box. Toby opened it. Inside was a gift. A telescope. His eyes widened. For real, Keanu nodded. Dreams need tools. Toby threw his arms around him. And just like that, the noise of the world faded. Later that night, bank press release. The Toby Initiative launches nationwide. With support from Keanu Reeves and community partners, this program is committed to helping children who dream big but are overlooked by society. Because sometimes the smallest voices spark the biggest changes. At the bank, Ryan's second chance. Ryan stood beside Sophie and 2 other team members, handing out brochures for the Toby Initiative. He wore a simple blue shirt. No blazer. No tie. A man in work boots approached with his daughter. Ryan smiled warmly. How can I help you today, sir? The man paused. You don't remember me, do you? Ryan blinked. I came here last year. You ignored me when I asked about business loans. Ryan's face flushed. Sir, I'm sorry. The man shrugged. That was then. This is now. He handed his daughter the form. Let's open your first account. As Ryan processed the application, he glanced at the small photo pinned to his desk. Toby's letter. Redemption wasn't easy, but it was possible. The man at the door. It had been 6 months since Keanu Reeves walked into that bank wearing a faded cap and simple jeans, and changed everything. In half a year, the Toby Initiative had spread across 18 states. Dozens of schools had launched financial literacy days. Community banks had adopted new dress-blind policies. Children from every background had opened their first savings accounts, some clutching dreams of owning telescopes, others dreaming of studios, farms, or freedom. The story had long outgrown the bank. It had outgrown Keanu himself. But it hadn't left him. Because every day since, letters continued to arrive. Hundreds of them. From children, parents, teachers, janitors, veterans, immigrants, retirees. Some were just one line. You reminded me I matter. Others were stories. Long, winding confessions from people who had spent years being overlooked, passed by, or judged before they even spoke. And yet Keanu stayed quiet, humble, out of the spotlight. He politely declined all interviews, turned down invitations to galas and award dinners. His name was only used on paper, never in person. Because for him, this had never been about fame. It was about respect, the one thing that should never have a price. 7:58 a.m., Keanu's home in the hills. The sky was still soft with sunrise when the knock came. Not urgent, not loud, just deliberate. Keanu was in the middle of making tea. He glanced at the door, puzzled. Few people ever showed up without calling first. He opened it. Standing on the front porch was an older man, tall, wiry, with salt and pepper hair and a face that looked like it had seen too much sun, too much time, and too many mistakes. He wore a brown jacket. His hands were weathered, his eyes sharp. Keanu Reeves? He asked softly. Yes. The man offered a small nod. I'm here because of my grandson. Keanu stepped aside. They sat on the patio, sipping tea. The man introduced himself as Robert Tate, retired longshoreman. He pulled from his jacket pocket a small, worn envelope. My grandson, Toby. You remember him. Keanu smiled gently. I do. He doesn't know I'm here. Neither does his mom. But I had to see you. In person. Keanu nodded. Why? Robert looked out at the trees swaying quietly in the wind. Because I've watched this whole thing unfold, he said. The initiative, the schools, the change, and I'd also watched you. Step back. Stay quiet. Let others take the credit. Keanu shrugged. It was never about me. Robert turned sharply. And that's exactly why it should be. Keanu didn't answer. Robert leaned forward. I used to think power looked like money, or big titles, or loud voices. But watching you, I realized real power is something else. What is it? Keanu asked. Robert smiled. It's doing the right thing when you could have walked away. He reached into his coat and pulled out a stack of handwritten notes, bound by a simple rubber band. What's this? Keanu asked. Robert placed them gently on the table. Letters. From kids in our neighborhood. Parents, teachers, seniors, veterans, all of them. They think what you did changed their lives. I didn't do much. You showed them they mattered, Robert said. You showed them someone saw them, even when they weren't dressed to impress. Keanu flipped through a few of the notes. Crayon drawings, thank you messages, a photo of a little girl in a wheelchair holding her first bank card. Robert's voice dropped. But here's the thing, Keanu. The world still needs you. Not as a symbol, not as a meme, as a voice. Keanu met his gaze. Robert leaned in. You've shown us what quiet dignity looks like. But now, it's time to speak. Later that day, National Youth Summit, San Diego. The event had been organized months ago. Over 1,000 students from across the country gathered to hear speakers, attend workshops, and share their visions for the future. Keanu had been invited, of course. He had politely declined. Again. Until that morning. Now, with just 10 minutes' notice, he walked into the back of the auditorium, unnoticed. No entourage, no spotlight. He stood at the edge of the stage while the final speaker wrapped up. And then the MC saw him. A hush swept the room. Gasps, whispers. Someone near the front dropped their phone. Keanu took the mic and paused. He stood there, silent for a long beat, before finally speaking. Keanu's final speech. I wasn't supposed to be here today, but someone reminded me that silence has its place, and so does voice. I've lived a life where people knew my name, and I've lived moments where people couldn't see past my clothes. And through it all, I've learned one truth that I want to give to you today. You matter. Not because of your bank balance, not because of your appearance, not because of where you were born or what school you went to. You matter because you exist. That's the only qualification for dignity. And if there's anything this journey has taught me, it's that we're not judged by what we wear. We're remembered by what we stand for. So here's what I stand for. Respect. For everyone. Every day. Everywhere. And I hope you'll stand with me. The room erupted. It wasn't the sound of celebrity applause. It was relief. Validation. Empowerment. 1,000 young people stood on their feet, not because they saw a movie star, but because they had seen a mirror. Epilogue. 1 year later. The Toby Initiative was now in 38 states. Ryan Hargrove was the Director of Dignity Education at Wellington Grand, leading internal reforms and working with nonprofits on inclusion training. He still kept Toby's letter pinned to his desk. Toby himself had just been awarded a junior astronomy scholarship. He still wore his cap every day, and when reporters asked what he wanted to be when he grew up, he smiled and said, "Someone like Keanu." And Keanu. He returned to his quiet life. Books, tea, trees. But every once in a while, when the mailman came by, he'd hand him another stack of letters, sometimes from strangers, sometimes from kids with big dreams and small voices, and Keanu would always read them. Because one day, someone somewhere would need a reminder that their worth wasn't in the clothes on their back, but in the heart they carried.